Brandon Marsh. Right. I thought we...
Let's marsh it up first.
Yeah. I'm going to get called Mrs. Honey again.
You are.
I think he improved a lot from where he was in Anaheim. So I gave him an A-. I don't think Brandon Marsh... I don't want him being my everyday left fielder, but it looks like that's where he's going to be. Ideally, I'd want more power out of my left fielder, but his defense is pretty good. I think he plays a better left than he does a center. But comparing him to himself, I think he took a lot of strides this year. I think he's another guy like Pache that has improved under Kevin Long. So I gave him an A-. I'm not in love with it. Maybe I could go B+. But I think he's generally in that area because he improved. What do you got?
Not an A-, that's for sure. Okay, so a little different than Miss Honey over here to my left. I like Brandon Marsh. I think he's a great clubhouse guy. I think he's always one that you see bringing the energy, dancing, brings the vibes, fills in where needed. And this year, 277 average with 12 home runs, so 60 RBIs. Postseason, honestly, was one of the guys for the Phillies that performed well in the NLCS, and there weren't many that we could talk about. But I thought that he was someone that in those moments where we found ourselves wondering who is actually playing well for the Phillies, Brandon Marsh was one that was giving you something.
He was the one guy locked in that
this
NLCS.
Postseason, 13 hits. That's way more than a number of people had. 1 home run, 4 RBIs. And I remember the NLCS specifically, he was one that was able to get hits, get good at bats. So for me, Brandon Marsh is just a solid B-. I actually have him in the same exact spot as Christian Pache. I think Brandon Marsh is a guy that has a good amount of, just aspects he adds to the team that's needed for, again, a solid role player. But he's not someone that I would rate as highly as, anything up above a B-, just because of the fact that for as great as he is at times, he can also do some pretty rough, boneheaded types things where it's just like, Brandon Marsh. So he's the later part of the postseason swung me, and I agree. I know somebody earlier was saying the final series definitely gave us a bad taste in our mouths and absolutely had us grading some guys lower. That's because it's the most important series of the season. Those are the most important games of the season. Those are the must-win at that point.
I did season-long
and
grades.
so I did season-long as well.
Bias,
but I also, like I mentioned, absolutely looked at the postseason with a bigger magnifying glass because that's what's more important than the regular season. So for Marsh, I think his postseason actually helped him out because there were times in the regular season that Marsh was not as good. So
all right, Tyler, what do you got here?
Marsh had a weird year. A really weird year in the fact that his April was stellar, his May was historically bad, and the rest of the year he was pretty good other than the September where he hit 200 in the regular season. Marsh's year was weird because of the fact that for a bulk of it, you didn't feel comfortable with him against left-handed pitching, and you can tell by that third stat where he only had 22 hits against against left-handed pitching. He had 292 against righties, 229 against lefties, but then you bring in the 13 for 40 in the DS and CS. He was really good in the postseason. He stepped up when it mattered. And I think that you've got solid defense, right? It's not Rojas and Pache level, but it's not bad either. It's like B-level defense, which if he's going to be my left fielder and one of those two guys are my center fielder at A+ or A- level defense, I'm super content. Brandon Marsh is a guy that I think is a buildable player on this team, unless they decide to make a move, and he's.
I think he's an intriguing trade
definitely
prospect.
He's great trade prospect.
If they're looking to
They've
make
upped
a move,
his stock here in Philadelphia.
correct.
Yeah.
Especially if you're thinking about that team that we're going to talk about later that apparently has no money. They're going to want a major league ready player.
Yeah.
He would be the guy.